What is the most controversial Hearthstone update of all time? Was it a bad expansion release? Did they mess up an attempt to balance the game? Or did they take away content players loved? To answer these questions, we're gonna go all the way back to the beginning, when on March 22nd, 2013, Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft was revealed to the public for the first time. This in and of itself was actually the first controversial update, with many keen gamers saying the game was definitely not what they were expecting to be revealed by Blizzard. Others were quick to point out the existence of the World of Warcraft trading card game. This controversial update had a happy ending. Unlike in patch 29.2.0.198037, when Blizzard would take away one of Hearthstone's most popular side game modes. This patch released on April 16, 2024, and it was a major patch containing the new Battlegrounds game mode Duos, positive, Battlegrounds Season 7, and many card changes for constructed Battlegrounds and Arena, as well as some other things. But what makes this patch so infamous, and in this case, so controversial, is that buried all the way at the bottom of the page, under the bug fixes and game improvements section, yes, that's what it's called, amongst things like fixed a bug where several totem summoning cards still generated strength totem instead of Wrath of Air totem, or fixed a bug where Whizbang would only use basic skins, or whatever. Just little things where there are bugs that they fix, things that are generally not that relevant but are nice to see cleaned up. Thrown into the bottom alongside those was General. Duels mode has been removed from the game. Players who had an ongoing heroic run had their runs prized out in the same way as is done during a seasonal reset. Tavern tickets can continue to be used in Arena. They just casually mentioned, oh yeah, Duels is dead. I mean, they announced it was coming, but it's funny that that's the slot of the patch notes that it took up. For those who don't know, Hearthstone Duels was much like the old school missions for Dungeon Run, where you would start with a small deck, and then throughout the game you would add treasures and other cards that you'd pick based on buckets to your deck. However, unlike Dungeon Run, where you were climbing up the ladder of different NPC bosses, you would actually be playing against other players. It was Dungeon Run meets PvP. Also, much like the Arena, you were trying to claim 12 wins before you suffered 3 losses. This was one of the most popular Hearthstone side game modes we've ever seen. Whether it was just a nice kind of way to have some wacky, fun, powerful thing on the side, or a way to even like farm some gold because it was like Arena rewards, but you could choose what cards you put in your starting deck. There is not a day that has gone by since this decision was made where I do not see a comment or just general sentiment about someone being sad that Duels is gone. Which is why I think without a shadow of a doubt, it is one of the most controversial Hearthstone updates we've ever seen. What would be a totally not controversial and even cool update is if you'd hit the subscribe button. Finding a patch more controversial than that is going to be tough, but we're going to try, starting with one of the oldest patches on this list, releasing in April 24, 2016. Patch 5.0.0.12574 was the largest patch to date, featuring all of the data for the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion. What it also had, though, for our list, was the release of the separation of game modes in constructed Hearthstone between standard format and wild format. Wild format is every card that they've released from every expansion since the start of time, just continues to pile up, making the total amount of cards available bigger and bigger, and allowing you to do fun, wacky, powerful things, mixing in your nostalgia from old and your new, cool, shiny tools from the new sets. Whereas standard is just cards from the last few years, keeping it fresh and constantly changing. At the time, this was the first time that they had split them into the standard and wild formats, with the Year of the Kraken being released. This was controversial in all the ways you can probably expect. People didn't want their cards to no longer be usable, people didn't want it to be split up, people didn't want the player base to go 2 separate ways, etc, etc. This may seem pretty obvious to a lot of you that like this is needed, if you've played like Magic or something where the game has gone on long enough that they have these different formats. But there were a lot of Hearthstone players that were new to card games altogether, whether they be like hardcore Blizzard fans that came over or just people that discovered it during its rise that didn't have any way to know that this was a good thing eventually. And so there was a lot of people that were just kind of worried or concerned or upset. Fast forward to today, we've had many standard versions as cards have come and gone, and it's very most certainly kind of split the community in two. Some people still play both formats, but you usually have people who only play Standard or people who only play Wild, and very few crossover. So that concern was at least fair. But if you've looked at Wild at all, there have been times where the power level and, combo of certain broken cards has been just a bit egregious. And so it makes sense to have a fresh, ever-changing, more manageable card size for balance in the form of Standard. I'd love to do an even older patch than that, but most of the early patches are like, hey, Undertaker, kind of broken. Maybe after like 6 months we should nerf it. Okay, that's the whole patch. Just that card got changed. Or, you know what? Leroy Jenkins is kind of annoying. Here's a copy pasta, right? Like, those are the early patches. There's not really a lot going on. It was just like, hey, here's Naxxramas. Hey, here's a nerf. Hey, here's GVG. Here's a single card nerf again. Here's TGT. That didn't do anything. So we're just going to sit around and wait and not give you any change. It's like, there's not a lot going on. Previously, we talked about removing a mode. How about we talk about adding a mode? Patch 21.4.0.95431 was a Hearthstone patch releasing on October 12, 2021, and it marked the release of the game mode Mercenaries. That's right. The patch introduced the newest game mode Mercenaries. Aren't we all excited about that? Mercenaries is like Pokemon or Slay the Spire merged meets Hearthstone. What's not to love? They added a whole new Mercenaries village where you could jump in and have different options to jump off to experience this kind of whole new ecosystem within Hearthstone, where you'd play different mercenaries. You'd have a fighting pit where you could fight up against other people's mercenaries in a matchmaking rating system. You'd have your PvE where you could fight against solo player encounters, kind of like you're climbing the Spire and Slay the Spire, and you're leveling up your mercenaries. You're acquiring resources. You're grinding out those levels, not so you can evolve, but so your things can do whatever they did. Nobody really cared about Mercenaries. And in typical Blizzard fashion, because they released it in 2021, the pre-orders for these modes that no one had ever played were ridiculously expensive. And then immediately were just setting themselves up for failure, because if you didn't love this game, there was absolutely no way you were going to be at all satisfied with your decision. At launch, it cost 900 gold to fully upgrade your village, just to unlock the buttons you had to click to operate the different availabilities. So if you wanted to go to the fighting pit, you had to pay 100 gold. If you wanted to go to the travel point where you unlock your hero difficulty for bounties, you had to spend 200 gold. If you wanted to upgrade the campfire, which was to add a slot to the task board, you had to spend 200 gold. You had to spend another 400 if you wanted to update the campfire again to add another slot to the task board. The task boards are an incentive to do a certain PvE content. You're paying to unlock the game mode. It makes no sense. I could go on and on about what Mercenaries is, what it isn't. Not really that important. It was just a really expensive, really grindy. I think the key thing to talk about for why this was controversial is that it was kind of exciting in the sense that it was Slay the Spire Pokemon meets Hearthstone, but it was all the worst parts. It was as if Pokemon took 4 times as long to grind out your Pokemon to the right levels and the right evolutions to be able to fight the gym leaders, but you just had to keep doing it over and over and over again, and then then you could play PvP, because if you didn't grind the hours and hours and hours and hours to level up your mercenaries, much like you would your Pokemon, you just have no chance against other people who did. And the PvP was actually fun, but nobody's going to experience it at scale, because you have to spend all this gold to get into it, you have to spend all this money to get the different cards and the different mercenaries and the different whatever, and then you have to spend hours and hours and hours just painfully grinding the same solo player encounter that doesn't change over and over and over again to level up your mercenaries to then have a chance to experience the PvP. It was just an astronomical failure. And alongside this controversial patch, we have another controversial patch that we can obviously clearly and easily discuss. Patch 25.4.0.165.029, which was a Hearthstone patch releasing on February 14, 2023. It was a major patch containing the newest mini-set, Return to Naxxramas. It featured Mythic Boss Rush and new factions in Mercenaries, a new Hearthstone arena rotation, and updated leaderboard, and more. For those who don't know, Mythic Boss Rush was a type of PvE endgame content in Mercenaries. So look at that. 2 years later, after they've added this game mode, they're still pumping out content. They're still giving it new exciting encounters. They're still giving it new exciting factions, which is a card property that provides small synergy between Mercenaries. But the reason they did this was the last time they were going to update Mercenaries ever. So they decided to go out with a bang and give it one final effort, no more than a year and a half later, when they would decide to sunset Mercenaries forever. When sunsetting the mode, they left this comment: after these updates, we will be focusing on making Hearthstone and Battlegrounds the best we can. At the same time, Mercenaries will continue to get support for bug fixes and periodic balance changes as needed, but no further regular content updates. With the new addition in this patch, we hope that Mercenaries will be a fun, fulfilling mode for players. AKA, here's a little bit left over, maybe we'll do something with small tweaks within the client. I don't actually know if they literally ever have. But otherwise, the game is done. A year and a half after we released it, collect massive amounts of money for pre-orders when you don't really know what you're getting, you just have hype. Throw out content, make it extremely grindy, refuse to make it more accessible, refuse to make it less painful. Just stick to what you've made with extremely expensive cards, mercenaries, etc. Extremely grindy requirements, and just all in all, an unimpressive and unaccessible game mode. These two patches are certainly one of the more controversial updates because having a new mode added and having it feel that bad and not be changed and cost that much and them just rolling with it left a lot of sour taste in people's mouth. And then after all that, they just give up on it a year and a half later. It left a lot of negative feelings for Hearthstone for people. They viewed it as like a cash grab, or just, you know, if it doesn't make money instantly, they're going to give up on it. Like they're not giving things a chance. They're not willing to change. It's like, boom, ship it, doesn't work. All right, we're dead. We give it up. Which, like, in some sense makes sense. But like when you're charging $1 bajillion for something, you have to budge a little. You have to like make it what people want, or like make it cheaper. And what's crazy is, like, you may be wondering to yourself, hey, you mentioned earlier that they got rid of duels, a mode people liked. Why'd they not keep that one and just sunset it like they did Mercenaries? Well, the reason for that is they think that duels required more attention and was a mode where people were promised more attention and expected more attention, and so they thought it would look negative to just kind of leave it there gaining dust. Whereas Mercenaries was an entirely closed off part of the game. Like, duels used Hearthstone cards, so as new Hearthstone cards come out, things in the duels could get wonky, things could break. They didn't want to have to commit to fixing any bugs or making any balance changes. Whereas Mercs, they could just kind of corner it off into the deep, dark dungeons of Hearthstone, leave the ridiculously expensive packs in the shop for the 4 players who want to buy them, and just collect whatever money left that they can. These two patches were so controversial. Like with the game come out in the first place, it's like there are people that were excited, but they were like, I don't know, man. And then it just didn't work out, and like they just didn't leave a lot of optimism for future modes and for like how they're gonna handle the game in the future. And honestly, when it was sunset, players immediately were worried about like future modes. Like, hey, are they ever gonna release a new game mode that does well and like they actually like people are gonna like, or are they just gonna ride this out? Like, are they gonna sunset Hearthstone? I think there were probably people at the time who were worried they were gonna get rid of duels. They wouldn't do that. Patch 24.2.0.148.211 was a Hearthstone patch released on August 30th, 2022, and it was a major patch containing the introduction of runestones. For those who don't know, runestones are an in-game currency that have existed for a while in the Chinese client, but did not exist until 2022 on this date in the international client. They are a currency that can be spent to buy many kinds of products, and they literally convert basically 1-to-1 to cents. So 500 runestones is $5. And get this, you go up. You know, in games, when you buy in-game currency, like you buy your gems or your riot points or your Robux or your V-Bucks, you buy like the bottom tier and it's like $5 to $8 and you get like, you know, 500 to 800 of your in-game currency. But then when you go up and you spend like $120 or something, you'd get like $200 worth of V-Bucks or whatever if you were to buy that same amount of V-Bucks on the bottom tier. Like, it pays you, you get more for bundling your money, right? Very common, but not for Hearthstone. No, they don't do sales. So 500 runestones for $5, 8,000 runestones for $80. Literally the exact same thing. The reason that they stated for why they were introducing runestones when they had just been using cash this whole time and it worked just as well was that they were going to use the runestones to offer additional smaller scale products like individual Battlegrounds hero skins or emotes, which you wouldn't pay any substantial amount for because you're not guaranteed to see the hero, and you're going to want to shuffle emotes, which like makes sense and would have probably felt less bad if it didn't take like 6,000 years for them to finally start using runestones. There's this chart here showing ranked usages for runestones versus money versus gold. And like, it's pretty clear that like, hey, we've been using money for everything. You can no longer, you know, buy mini sets with money. We have to use runestones. We can't buy as many cosmetics and bundles without buying runestones. And it was just like this messy, weird system where like, hey, you're going to buy some runestones. You're going to have to buy more than you need for this thing. And then you're going to be left over with extra runestones when it converts 1-to-1 to money anyway. Like, if there's a $35 thing, for example, and runestones, they sell in amounts of $20, $50, or $80, and this thing costs $35, you have to buy either 20 and 10 and 5, or like buy 5,000. Like, I guess it's not as bad as it sounds because you could spend 20 bucks and then 10 bucks and then 5 bucks and just jump through those hoops. But it's still just like way worse than spending $35, you know, and you're going to end up with some runestones if you don't. And it's like, okay, maybe you use them on other purchases. It's like, but that's just like, it feels like kind of just gross. It's like in-game purchases on mobile games. Like, it just doesn't feel good. And there's just no reason, if you're not going to give any sort of bundling benefit to like paying your money up front and like storing it in your account. It's like, it doesn't do anything. But you know what's interesting about this patch? Is that wasn't the only thing that was controversial about it. In addition, there was major updates to Battlegrounds, such as Battlegrounds quests. That's purely positive. Battlegrounds card changes, you know, your normal share of positive and negative. In the Battlegrounds track, which is a system in Battlegrounds that allows the player to earn various rewards by earning XP and leveling up. It's much like you'd see in Fortnite where you have your battle pass. League has a battle pass now. TFT has some sort of pass. Every game these days, Rocket League has a battle pass. They don't call them all battle passes, but Tavern Pass, Battle Pass, whatever. They all have tracks or passes. It's a pretty common and effective way to sell things in games these days. But what came with it was a pay-to-win mechanic that limited 2 of the hero choices at the start of a Battlegrounds game to only be usable if you purchase this track. For quick context, the way Battlegrounds works is you queue up, you just hit a button, 8 players get into a game, and you are given 4 hero choices for which hero you're going to play that game. And heroes make a fairly significant impact on your game. They all have different hero powers and have various levels of power and strength, much like anything would in a game. There's different amounts of balance. Some are really bad, some are really good. So being able to choose good ones and have a good one offered to you would mean that you would win a little bit more than you would otherwise. And this was just standard. You picked one of the 4, whichever you liked most or whichever you thought was best, and you played. With the release of the first Battlegrounds track, they now took 2 of those away from you. So you have half the options as anybody else who pays for the track, and you are immediately at a competitive disadvantage behind a paywall. This was one of the first, if not the first, very clearly pay-to-win aspects introduced into Hearthstone. Like with any game, when you add pay to win, you're gonna have an uproar. You're gonna have a lot of people complaining. This, I think looking back, probably didn't hurt the game mode that much. Like, obviously we can't see player numbers, but Battleground has still been very successful and very popular since, but it is still a little bit of feels bad and a little bit of pay to win in a game that before that had none. That, combined with runestones, I think makes this a solid contender for one of the most controversial updates in Hearthstone history. An additional reason that you could be upset about Battlegrounds introducing pay to win, or just Hearthstone in general introducing pay to win, is that it sets a precedent that, like, hey, we did it, we got away with it, let's just keep doing it. So in patch 28.6, when the pre-purchase for Whizbang's Workshop came out, they toyed around with the idea of getting an early access epic into the game. So if you bought the pre-purchase, you were given immediate access to an epic card that you could play on ranked right away that you could not get unless you bought the pre-purchase. You could not craft it, you could not buy it with gold. You had to pay real money on this pre-purchase. So by definition, you are now paying for something that other people cannot have. And like, if it's the best card ever, that is immense pay to win. And so people were immediately like, yo dude, what are we doing here? That is crazy. We have been releasing pre-orders for like a decade. Why are we now throwing in 2 epics that, other than the small window where you have early access to it, offers me nothing? Like, in terms of rewards, if I look at this now, I'm like, this is nothing. It gives 2 epic cards with the bundle. It's like, what's the point? That's no value that I'm paying this money for. So it's just pay to win in the early access. That's it. That's all that there is to it. Thankfully, the card that they did this with, maybe intentionally, maybe not, was really, really bad. But it's just didn't feel so great. And a lot of people were really upset about it. I personally didn't care so much about it, but I think that's because I saw the card and immediately knew, okay, that card's bad. I could see why you would be concerned about this and how this would be a problem if the card being released to you early was really, really good, and you were someone who was trying to climb high ranks, especially now that Hearthstone Esports is back. Doing something like this probably shouldn't happen, right? It's just by definition pay to win. So 28.6, another patch with pay to win that is in consideration for the most controversial Hearthstone update of all time. 21.0.0.88998 released on July 27th, 2021, which prepared for the release of United in Stormwind. Obviously, at the time when it's announced, everyone's excited. It's like, hey, it's a new expansion. What a great time. But that excitement and enjoyment of the new stuff would not last very long until people started to get really annoyed, perhaps really bored, perhaps really upset by the introduction of a new mechanic called quest lines, which were similar to old school Journey to Ungrow quests, where you'd play your quest at the start of a game, and then you'd have a thing to do, and if you do that thing, you get a reward. With quest lines, it instead broke up that reward into 3 smaller bits, or rather 2 small bits that led up to an even normally sized still big bit. So instead of just, playing your spells on your minions and getting Galvadon, for example, you would instead play some spells on minions and then maybe draw a card, and then you play some more spells on minions and the next one you cast was doubled or something, and then you'd get your Galvadon. An example of this is Lost in the Park, which is a druid quest line that says gain 4 attack with your hero, reward, gain 5 armor. That as a card is terrible, but thankfully when you complete that first quest line, you get a second quest line that says gain 5 attack with your hero, gain 5 armor, and draw a card. And then when you complete that questline, you get a final questline that says gain 6 attack with your hero, reward, get Guff the Tough. And Guff the Tough is a 5 mana, 8 attack, 8 health minion with taunt and battle cry. Give your hero plus 8 attack this turn, gain 8 armor. So instead of, as we see, instead of playing spells and getting a Galvadon or gaining attack and getting a Guff, you play attack, you get a thing that's a little bit of a benefit. You play in some more attack, you get a little bit of a benefit, and then you gain some more attack and get Guff. That's how quest lines work. They split the reward of quests into stages. But much like quests, they started in your hand. So what happens is you'd have quest lines like Raid the Dogs, which was play pirates, draw a weapon, play pirates, deal 2 damage to a random enemy twice, play pirates, get Captain Rokara, which would summon the Juggernaut, which was a dormant placeholder that at the start of your turn would summon a pirate, equip a warrior weapon, and fire 2 cannonballs that deal 2 damage. So you now have infinite value, infinite weapons, infinite pirates, and infinite damage for the rest of the game. The problem with a quest line like this, you just have rewards. You don't have things you must do to get the rewards. You just are playing Pirate Warrior anyway. That's been a deck that's existed in some variations at this point, up to this point, since Mean Streets of Kyrgyzstan released patches and just generally started using the fact that pirates were a tribe in Hearthstone. And since then, we've had Pirate Warrior pretty much on and off since. And so with standard pirates being added in neutral and in warrior, you were just playing Pirate Warrior anyway. So you throw this quest line in, and suddenly you're just spamming the board with pirates, and you don't really care about running out of them, because eventually you're just going to have Rokara summoning the Juggernaut for you. And because it's something like this that is so easy to play, it's in your hand every turn, and it tells you how to play. So it's just like, yeah, play questline, play pirates. Play pirates. You have mana? Play pirates. Don't hero power. Don't mess around with anything else. Just play pirates. Just put stats and play. Very simple Hearthstone, which a lot of players love. But because a lot of players love it, and it's so simple, it's the same every time. I mean, they're just vomiting pirates out. And so you're going to play against a lot of this deck. And it's quite strong. And it was just everywhere. You always have the quest line in the start of your deck. It tells you how to play it. A lot of them tutored your deck as well. And it just led to this situation where, I think incorrectly in a lot of ways, but people were just really feeling like the board didn't matter. They were just really feeling like they died from hand a lot. The power level was really high. There were just a lot of people frustrated with the experience. I don't necessarily agree with those statements. I think that board mattered a lot. If you look at something like Raid the Dogs, all they're doing is putting stuff on the board. But there were certain things where they would just win from hand. They would just kind of ignore what you're doing and do their quest line. And it created kind of this meta similar to the Witchwood with Baku and Gen, where everyone was just playing strong hero powers and the games just kind of all felt the same. And there was only a certain amount of the ones quest lines that worked super well. So you were just every game, someone was playing a quest line in one, no matter what class they were playing. And it was just kind of made people not have as much fun for one reason or another. And this, I think, in a lot of ways, is looked back on as a really negative experience of an expansion, which is interesting because if you hang out with people who play the game a lot and who are in higher ranks, they probably talk about the expansion really fondly. But people who play more casually or don't play as often, or just, I don't know, honestly, get different things out of the game, not in a bad way, but it's just, you have such a polarized response to this, is what I'm saying. Some people really love it, some people really hate it. And as anything, when you have people loving and hating it, it is very controversial, which is why I think that this patch belongs on this list of some of the most controversial Hearthstone updates of all time. Up next, we have a series of updates all revolving around Hearthstone's progression system. For whatever reason, developers decided that they wanted to make the weekly and daily quests you get in order to accumulate resources by playing the game harder to complete and less lucrative. Technically, they made them reward more gold and stuff and more experience, but it was 300% more effort for 20% more gold. So as you would imagine, that update didn't go over so well, because suddenly you're not just playing a few games of Hearthstone every day and completing your quests and kind of having a good time, keeping up the relationship with the game. Suddenly it's a chore where you're being asked hey, if you want this stuff, you have to come play Hearthstone even when you don't want to. You have to put in the work, you have to put in the chores, And much like what we talked about with mercenaries, it's not fun to put in the work all the time. There are some games where you get sucked into the loop of grinding out this thing so you can grind out this thing so you can grind out this thing, and the progression and the grind is the game, and it's really fulfilling. But it's something like Hearthstone. We don't want to have to grind all the time when we don't want to play. We just want to be able to play the decks we have and have fun and not have to worry about going in out of our way to complete these quests. And so it was very, very controversial, and people were very upset. Due to the outcry, they went out of their way to release a Hearthstone progression update blog. This wasn't a patch number. This was just a blog. Or the, I don't know, game director named Tyler. Yeah, Tyler Buellman, game director, gave us a little update and said, earlier this year, we made some adjustments to our weekly quests, as I just talked about. Our initial changes in patch 29.2 were aimed at rewarding our most committed players while encouraging others to play more. But after the changes went live, they didn't reward players for their time in game quite like we had hoped. Yeah, I would sure hope that 300% of effort for 20% extra was not quite what you'd hoped. On the contrary, we saw that some players gave up on those harder quests and played less instead of more. Those who did work to complete the weekly quests told us that they saw them as a chore. Yeah, I guess that's where I got that opinion. I just wrote it there. An important part of design is acknowledging when a change doesn't work. I actually am really pleased that they went back on this. Good for them. Learning why it doesn't work and then adjusting in a different way. So starting in patch 31.0, we're making 3 changes. We're reverting the quests back to what they were before, and they're also going to improve the reward strike by swapping out 5 of the early 50 gold ones with 5 packs and adding 4 more packs to the Tavern Pass overall. Love that. We love free stuff. W update. And updating the regular Tavern Brawl reward pack from a standard pack to a pack from the latest expansion. So, hey, despite having to ask for this quest reversion for some time, we eventually got it. And so this, I think, removes some of the sting of the first controversial update. But you can imagine, like, when the outcry is so big that you have to release a blog post ahead of time saying, like, oh, hold on, our bad. All right, hands up. We're caught a moat. We goofed up. We messed up. We tried to do something we couldn't quite get away with, right? Just like to calm people down in the interim before the patch can go live, will they actually fix this, right? Like a blog post is like, control the damage now, let people know, hey, it's actually going to get better in the next patch, just hold on. Because of that, you can imagine there was quite the upward that would have had to have led to this point. So I think, you know, them ruining how free-to-play players, or just people who don't spend like infinite amount of money on the game, continue to be able to afford cards and continue to be able to afford to play the game. So a big L that became a W, still very controversial, obviously, in terms of one of the most controversial Hearthstone updates of all time. This next patch for consideration is patch 17.0.0.44222. It was also a big, large patch, which introduced the Year of the Phoenix Hall of Fame rotations, new Priest Classic and Basic cards, several card unnerfs, the release of duplicate protection, a new arena rotation, and changes to battlegrounds. It also buffed things like Zephyrus the Great, making him more greater than ever. But importantly for this, what it did of significance, of the most significance, was it changed Hearthstone forever. You see, Hearthstone is a game, a collectible card game per se, of 9 classes. Everyone loves it. We're all living in complete harmony. We're all playing our paladins and our rogues and our shamans and our mages and our druids, certainly not our priests, and we're all just absolutely loving everything. Until April 2nd came around and they released the first new class, Demon Hunter. Again, you'd think this would be purely positive and purely exciting and purely wonderful, and for a lot of players it was. For others, they didn't love changing what had been so core and had worked so well for so long, because if you want to balance the game more, you would actually remove classes instead of adding more. By adding more variables, it's harder to keep reins on them all. But for people who want to experience new things, a whole new class offers a lot of new play options if they can make it feel different from the others. Part of the reason I think that Demon Hunter is like forever tainted is that on release, it was one of the most broken things we have ever seen in the history of ever. Like, just winning every single game possible without really thinking, unless you were playing in the mirror match. So badly so that they had to do something they had never done for 6 years, which was nerf cards 24 hours after they released them to the live game, making them all tied for the world record for the fastest nerfed card ever. Demon Hunter is something that also historically has kind of aggro or combo themes and playstyles. And so for a lot of players, they've just written the class off as something they don't like, as something they just wish didn't exist. And like, I get it. You know, people like longer games. People like playing minions, killing things, and just having some value going on. They don't necessarily want to kill people hyper fast or have these cool combos all the time. We see that very clearly with like what people watch on YouTube and Twitch and general comments you see on like Reddit and Twitter. And so with this deck, it comes out, it's an aggro combo, kind of glaive, kind of mischievous type class, and it's just bonkers levels of broken. And so you're just left with this like just sadness, like this, like it's like clearly we're on a new era of Hearthstone now. We got a whole new green guy here. It's pushing aggro, it's pushing combo, and the players who miss old school days of like value slush, just like grinding out these long matches and like really feeling like the board was all that mattered and all we could do. And for whatever reason, mostly I think through rose-tinted nostalgia glasses, just loved that game more. This is just like a big, clear, like, yo, that's never coming back. Like, the future is here, old man, and it is fast-paced aggro and fast-paced crazy combo decks involving 10 classes that now look ugly on the create class hero screen, because instead of a 3x3 grid, it's like a 3-4 grid. We would eventually then go on to get an 11th class. However, that one does a lot better at being a control, slow, greedy type class, and I think that it's no coincidence why Demon Hunter is less popular than Death Knight when you consider that and that alone. With that said, whether you love Demon Hunter or not, it was inarguably one of the most infamous Hearthstone patches of all time. So with all those talked about, what do you think is the most controversial Hearthstone update of all time? As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe.